You know what makes you feel dead inside? Safety. Not the good kind, not the kind that keeps you from getting mauled by a bear or whatever. The other kind, the kind that wraps you in bubble wrap and puts you in a temperature-controlled room and feeds you the same pre-approved experiences over and over until you forget what it feels like to actually want something. Modern life is so safe, so sterile, so perfectly climate-controlled that we've stopped being human beings and started being these weird maintenance machines for our own comfort. We wake up, we go to jobs, we tolerate, we come home, we scroll, we buy things, we sleep, we do it again. And again. And the whole time there's this screaming voice somewhere deep in our chests asking if this is really it, if this is what we traded our one wild life for, and we just turn up the volume on our noise-canceling headphones and pretend we didn't hear it. Chuck Palahniuk heard it. He wrote Fight Club like he was performing a psychological autopsy on an entire generation, cutting through the fat to show us what was rotting underneath. The book isn't just a story about guys punching each other in basements. It's a diagnosis. Palahniuk writes, the way Tyler Durden lives, stripped down to the absolute bone, no wasted words, no comfort, just sharp little sentences that hit you in the chest and don't apologize. He looked at the late 90s, at this moment, when we collectively decided that having the right stuff would make us into the right people, and he said, no, actually, you're dying inside and you don't even know it. The comfort is killing you. The safety is poison. Think about the narrator at the beginning of the book, flipping through his IKEA catalog like it's scripture. He's picking out furniture the way other people pick out personalities. The Klipsk personal office unit, the Johanneshof armchair. He can tell you the name of every single thing in his condo, every carefully selected piece of Scandinavian minimalism, and he thinks this means something. He thinks if he just gets the right coffee table, the right duvet cover, the right set of matching wine glasses for dinner parties he doesn't even want to host, then he'll finally feel complete, like he's building himself out of catalog pages. And we're supposed to see how pathetic this is, right? Except we do the exact same thing. We spend 40 minutes reading reviews for a smart toaster we're going to use twice in our lives. We refresh our Amazon carts like we're checking on sick relatives. We convince ourselves that the next purchase is going to be the one that finally makes us feel like we have our shit together, that we're real adults with real lives, and then the box arrives and we feel nothing. Just the faint hum of disappointment and the knowledge that we'll be doing this again next week with something else. The narrator is trapped. He's a hostage to his own stuff. He can't leave his condo because what if something happens to his furniture? What if someone steals his officially licensed coffee table? His identity is so tangled up in his possessions that losing them would mean losing himself. And that should sound insane, but it doesn't, does it? Because we know that feeling. We know what it's like to care more about our things than our actual lives, to spend more energy arranging our bookshelves than having thoughts worth putting in books. Here's the weird part. The narrator knows something's wrong. He can feel the numbness creeping in. He's got insomnia so bad he hasn't really slept in months, walking through his life like a ghost, and his doctor won't help him. You want to see real pain? Go visit a support group. So he does. He starts crashing support groups for diseases he doesn't have. Testicular cancer on Tuesdays, melanoma on Thursdays. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because what he's doing is obscene, right? He's a tourist in other people's suffering. He's using their actual dying as a kind of emotional pornography, taking their real pain and using it to feel something, anything, in his own anesthetized life. But it works. When he cries into Bob's massive chest at the testicular cancer group, when he lets himself fall apart in a room full of men who are actually facing death, he finally feels real. He can finally sleep. Look, that's horrifying. It is. But it's also the most honest thing in the book. Because the only place people are allowed to drop their masks anymore is when they're literally dying. The rest of the time, we're all performing this weird theater of being fine, of having it together, of carefully curating our lives for an invisible audience that doesn't even care. We're so locked into our own performance that we've forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely vulnerable, to actually need other people, to admit that we're scared and small and have no idea what we're doing. The narrator has to go sit with dying men just to remember what human connection feels like. And even then, it's fake. It's stolen. It's not really his. Then his condo explodes. Everything he owns, every carefully selected piece of his identity, just gone. Vaporized. And this should be a tragedy, right? This should break him. Instead, it's the best thing that ever happened to him. The things you own end up owning you. Tyler says this, and it sounds like fortune cookie philosophy until you really think about it, until you realize how much of your life you've spent in service to stuff that doesn't matter. The narrator spent years building this perfect little nest, this shrine to the person he thought he was supposed to be, and it was suffocating him. It was keeping him small and safe and dead inside. The explosion doesn't destroy him, it frees him. There's something terrifying about hitting rock bottom, but there's also something sacred about it. When you lose everything, when all the carefully constructed bullshit gets stripped away, you finally get to see what's actually there. Who you are when you're not performing. What you want when you're not trying to want the right things. The narrator moves into Tyler's rotting house on Paper Street, and it's a disaster. It's falling apart. There's no IKEA furniture, no corporate-approved lifestyle, and for the first time in his adult life, he can breathe. Because he's not trying to be anyone anymore. He's just existing, being a person. Living in a body that takes up space and makes messes and doesn't fit neatly into any catalog. And honestly, most of us are never going to hit rock bottom like that. Our condos aren't going to explode. We're going to keep buying things and arranging them and pretending it means something. But we can still ask the question, what would be left if all of it went away? If you lost your job, your stuff, your carefully constructed image, who would you actually be? And are you living in service to that person, or are you living in service to the performance? If this kind of midnight honesty feels familiar to you, if you're tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not, consider subscribing. Let's walk through this weird modern reality together. Because we're all trying to figure out how to be human in a world that keeps telling us to be products. Tyler takes the narrator's hand and pours lye on it. Chemical burn. The skin bubbles and melts, and the pain is excruciating. And the narrator does what we all do. He tries to escape into his cave, his meditation technique, his safe place. And Tyler slaps him. Stay with the pain. Don't escape it. Don't make it mean something else. This is the greatest moment of your life, and you're off somewhere trying to pretend it isn't happening. We do this constantly. Something hurts, something scares us, something makes us uncomfortable, and we immediately reach for the anesthetic, Netflix, alcohol, scrolling through our phones until our eyes glaze over, anything to not be present with the actual reality of our lives. We've built these elaborate systems to avoid feeling anything real, and we call it self-care, we call it relaxation, but really it's just slow-motion suicide. We're killing the parts of ourselves that are capable of feeling. The chemical burn isn't about pain for pain's sake. It's about staying present. It's about not running away from the parts of life that are hard and scary and real. Your pain is real. Your fear is real. You are real. Not the carefully edited version you present to the world, not the person you're supposed to be according to the catalog, but the messy, scared, alive thing underneath. And you can't get to that person by meditating it away, or buying it away, or streaming it away. You have to sit with it. You have to let it burn. In the parking lot behind the bar, the narrator and Tyler hit each other for the first time. Not because they're angry, not because they hate each other, because they want to feel something, because they want to remember that they're meat and bone, that they're animals living in bodies with limits, that they can break. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, but that's not the important part. The important part is that they're waking up. They're stepping out of the corporate coma, out of the numbed-out performance of modern life. And they're doing something that has no purpose except to make them feel alive. No productivity, no self-improvement, no carefully optimized lifestyle upgrade. Just two guys hitting each other in a parking lot because it's real, and it spreads. Because they're not the only ones who feel dead inside. All these other men, all these corporate drones in their khakis and their button-downs, they're all dying the same slow death. They all feel the numbness. They all want to remember what it's like to be human. Fight Club becomes this space where they can shed the performance, where they can be raw and bloody and alive, where they can look at each other and say, yeah, I'm scared too. I don't know what I'm doing either. I'm just a person and I hurt. It's the same thing the narrator was looking for in the support groups. Except this time, it's real. This time, it's his. But here's the thing. Tyler Durden isn't real. He's a hallucination. He's the narrator's split personality, his shadow self, all the rage and freedom and chaos that he's been repressing his entire life because good boys don't act like that. Successful people don't throw tantrums. You're supposed to smile and nod and do your job and want the right things. Tyler is everything the narrator isn't allowed to be. And he's been living inside him the whole time, screaming to get out. The revelation that Tyler isn't real should change everything about how we read the book. Because the narrator didn't need some enlightened anarchist to come save him from his boring life. He had the capacity for freedom inside him all along. He just couldn't access it. He was so locked into being the person he thought he was supposed to be that he had to invent an entirely different person to give himself permission to live. And that's the real horror of comfort poisoning. Not that we're physically trapped, but that we're mentally trapped. We've internalized the cage so completely that we can't imagine what it would be like to be free. Tyler does terrible things. He starts Project Mayhem. He recruits an army. He plans to blow up credit card companies and reset the economy to zero. And the narrator realizes, slowly and then all at once, that this has gone too far. That destruction for destruction's sake isn't freedom, it's just another kind of prison. That you can't punch your way to enlightenment or explode your way to meaning. At some point, you have to actually build something. You have to actually live. The end of the book is ambiguous and messy and doesn't give you easy answers, which is perfect, because easy answers are part of the problem. We want someone to tell us the 5 simple steps to feeling alive again, the one weird trick to escape the numbness, and there isn't one. There's just the ongoing work of being awake, of noticing when you're performing instead of living, of letting go of the things that are suffocating you even when they look like success from the outside, of staying present with your own pain and fear and joy instead of medicating it all into a dull hum. You don't need to blow up buildings to be free. You don't need to start an underground fighting ring, or pour lye on your hand, or reject soap and running water. But you might need to blow up the version of yourself that you've been building out of catalogs and expectations and fear. You might need to lose some things. Not your stuff, necessarily, though maybe that too, but the obsession with control, the need to be perfect, the performance of having it all together. The idea that if you just buy the right things and do the right things and want the right things, you'll finally feel like a real person. Because you're already a real person. You always were. Messy and scared and alive. The comfort didn't make you real. It just made you numb. And numbness feels like safety right up until you realize you've stopped living. Right up until you look around at your perfectly appointed life and realize you feel nothing. Right up until you're so desperate to feel something, anything, that you'll crash support groups or start fights or blow everything up just to remember what it's like to be here in a body, on a planet, alive. Chuck Palahniuk didn't write Fight Club to give you a blueprint. He wrote it to punch you in the face, to wake you up, to make you ask what you've been running from and what you've been running toward and whether any of it actually matters. The book is uncomfortable because the truth is uncomfortable. We are dying inside our comfortable lives. We are medicating ourselves into oblivion. We are performing instead of being. And somewhere deep down, we know it. We've always known it. We just didn't have the language for it until someone stripped the language down to the bone and showed us what we look like underneath. So wake up, not violently, not destructively, just honestly. Look at your life. Really look at it. Strip away the performance and the stuff and the carefully curated image and ask yourself what's left. Ask yourself what you're afraid of losing. Ask yourself what you'd do if you lost it anyway. Ask yourself when you last felt real, and then stay with that feeling. Don't medicate it away. Don't buy something to make it stop. Don't scroll until it gets quiet again. Just stay. Be here. Be alive. Be the person you are, not the person you think you're supposed to be. That's the work. That's all of it. And it's terrifying and liberating and it never ends, but at least you're awake. At least you're here. At least you're real.